exponents, we have two other words that we're dealing with. We have a base and a power. And if you look at a power combines two things. It deals with both a base and an exponent. The base is the bottom number that you are going to be multiplying by itself. The exponent is the number of times that you multiply that number. So if you look over to your right-hand side, this whole entire component here is called the power. And that power contains a base of 4 and an exponent of 2. Exponential form is basically a shorter way of writing multiplication using a base and an exponent. So here I have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. So instead, to simplify that, I can do 5 to the 4th power, 5 being my base and the 4 being my exponent. So if you look in the first example here as 8 to the 3rd power, 8 is going to be my base, my exponent is 3. Now go on to the next little part there down at the bottom, example 2. I want you to write the following in exponential form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to count how many 2's are present. The 2 is going to be my base, and I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So therefore my exponent is 6. And for part B, it asks you to evaluate that. So I can use my calculator to do this, or I can just plug in what I see for my exponential form. So if I take 2 in my calculator, and on my calculator it has a little tiny hat sign that I use, and then I plug in the number 6. So 2 to the 6th power is going to give me 64. If I were to go back up here to 8 to the 3rd power, I would have 8 times 8 times 8. 8 times 8 here is going to give me 64. 64 times another 8 is going to give me 512. All right, let's go on to the next sheet. So here again, powers with positive bases. When you have a positive base, it's usually very straightforward that your answers are going to be positive, regardless of the exponent. So if I have 4 squared is going to be 4 times 4, which is going to give me 16. 2 to the 3rd power, or sometimes you'll hear people say 2 cubed. So it'll be 2 times 2 times 2, which 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 being 8. And the last one here is going to be 3 to the 6th power, and 3 to the 6th power, if I plug it in my calculator and use my hat, it's going to give me 729. So now, the tricky part here is when we're looking at our powers with negative bases. And a negative base, you need to consider whether or not it's on the inside of brackets or parentheses or on the outside. So for the first example, if you notice, my negative sign is on the inside of the parentheses. That means the whole thing has to be considered, and that negative 2 to the 4th power is actually going to be written 4 times. So it's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And as we know with our rules, we're dealing with positive and negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. So therefore, my final answer should be, obviously, a positive 16. The difference here in the next one, and this is actually a typo here, these should be written as negative 2 to the 4th and negative 2, with a negative sign on the outside, and 2 to the 4th in the inside of these parentheses here. So in this scenario, this first one here, and I'm going to circle it in red, this first one here has a negative sign written on the outside. That negative needs to remain out in the front there. And here, if you notice the same thing, the negative is written also out in the front of this. So this is the same as this scenario. I have to keep my negative sign on the outside, so then it would be just 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So therefore, my final answer would be negative 16. Okay, going on to the next one. If I have now a negative 2 to the 3rd power, if you notice, again, the negative sign is on the inside, but because I have an odd number here, dealing with 3, if I have a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2, when that exponent is odd, more than likely my answer, and always, it's going to be a negative number. So a negative times a negative is a positive then times a negative is going to give me a negative answer. So here 2 to the third power is going to be 8, and it's going to give me an answer of a negative 8, right? So again, just always watching what your brackets are telling you. Here, if you notice, the base here is negative 5, and the next one, the exponent is 6. However, the exponent does not apply to the first negative sign, so it has to come along with it in the sense that it needs to stay on the outside. So here, I have my negative sign. This is going to be this one from out here. And then I have negative 5, but I have to do this 6 times. So I have negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. So in this particular scenario, if I have 5 to the 6th power, I end up with, don't forget the negative sign in the front, negative 15,625. So down here at the bottom, the difference between these values here, in looking at them different ways, for example, 5, how are they different, how are they the same? Well, they do have the same base and the same exponent. The difference is that one has parentheses around the whole entire negative number. The other one just has the negative sign in the outside, out in the front. So you do not consider the negative when actually multiplying it by itself. So the first one is negative 5 squared, which is written as negative 5 times negative 5. The second one is negative 5 squared. So my negative sign stays in the front. I have 5 times 5. So then a negative times a negative is a positive, as a positive 25. Here I have a negative 25, and this is my final answer. So going on to the last little bit here, let's look at negative 6 squared and negative 6 to the, I think that's the 5th power. So again, looking at them, the difference is that this number here, it's an even number. This number here is an odd number. And I'm still dealing with a negative. But if I have an even number or an exponent, my answer, even if it starts off as negative, my answer will be positive. In the other scenario, if I have an odd number exponent, my answer will be negative. Okay? So now what I would like you to do, attached in your packet, you need to complete on page 97, numbers 4 through 13. It might seem like a lot, but a lot of this is very basic. A lot of this is review from last year. So this is what you need to complete for homework tonight. You started in class now, and make sure that you guys come and get extra help if you need it. You can see Mr. Wall if you need any extra math help, okay? Thanks, guys.